Welcome to Weird PVD, the podcast. Every week, your host, Sherry Kasperzak, takes you to the odd corners of beautiful Providence, Rhode Island. From big blue bugs to unique art, from weird history to weird food, you'll never look at Rhode Island's creative capital the same again. Tune in every Weird Wednesday. So, riddle me this, PVD weirdos. What do Guillermo del Toro, embalming, and Rhode Island have in common? Well, let me tell you. It's the Fisk Metallic Burial Case. This metal coffin, also called the Fisk Mummy, makes a notable appearance in the new Frankenstein movie from Guillermo del Toro. Mia Goth's character, Claire Frankenstein, Victor's mother, is buried in a metallic coffin with a glass faceplate, so her lifeless face is visible. It's a striking vision. And it's the kind of thing you might chalk up to fiction. But there's nothing fictional about this cool metal coffin. The Fisk Metallic Burial Case was invented in the 1840s by a New York stove maker named Almond Fisk. Now, let's just take a moment to appreciate the name Almond. That's one you don't hear every day. And I, for one, think it needs to make a comeback. So if you're expecting and you decide to name your kid Almond, let me know. Now, Almond and his family faced an emotionally crippling situation. You see, Almond's younger brother, William, died in 1844 in Oxford, Mississippi. The problem was that the Fisk family burial plot was located in Chazy, New York. Modern embalming techniques and refrigerated transportation wouldn't be invented for another couple of decades. So William's body couldn't be transported for a proper funeral and burial. But this tragedy set Almond into motion. You see, Almond's specialty was metal stoves and boilers. He sold them at his shop on Water Street in New York City. He knew that iron stoves were airtight and that an airtight casket would preserve a body so it could be transported for burial. Really kind of genius if you think about it. Not only would the airtight nature of the coffin preserve the body, it would prevent the spread of disease. And he even included a glass enclosure at the face so loved ones could say their final goodbyes after the body was delivered. According to Almond's patent, air may be exhausted so completely as entirely to prevent the decay of the contained body on principles well understood. Or, if preferred, the coffin may be filled with any gas or fluid having the property of preventing putrefaction. End quote. So where does Rhode Island come into play, you might ask? This Almond guy was from New York after all. Well, after receiving the patent for his metallic coffin in 1848, Fisk entered into a licensing agreement with A.C. Barstow & Co. of Providence. Production began in 1849 at 10 Broad Street. Now, you might think this would be revolutionary and that everyone would want one of these. The problem was these caskets were extremely expensive. The average pine coffin in the mid-1800s cost about $2. Now, that's about $83 in 2025 dollars. The Fisk Metallic Burial Casket cost about $100, and that's a little more than $4,000 in 2025. Given that the average casket today costs between $2,000 and $5,000, the Fisk casket would still be a pricier option, even by today's standards. Not to mention the Victorians, yes, the same people who photographed the corpses of their dearly departed, were apparently absolutely revolted by the form-fitting, mummy-esque coffins with the glass faceplate. Probably the most famous person to be buried in a Fisk Metallic Burial Case was former First Lady Dolly Madison. When Dolly died in 1849, at the ripe old age of 81, her body was publicly displayed for 2 years in Washington, D.C., before being stored in her father-in-law's private tomb. They later interred her next to her husband, former President James Madison. This caused quite a sensation. Well, it did for the people who could afford these coffins anyway, which were largely wealthy or famous people. In fact, Almond's coffin concern took off so quickly he had to expand his facilities. He built a foundry in Queens, New York, but this is where Almond had some nutty bad luck. So, as I mentioned before, the Fisk Metallic Burial Case was airtight. In November of 1858, some bad publicity hit Raymond & Co., which was the company Almond formed with his father-in-law to produce the metal caskets. According to Atlas Obscura, the airtight nature of the coffin could have had an unintended side effect: explosion. As the body breaks down and releases its leakage, it needs some, for lack of a better expression, breathing room. It was only a matter of time before a metal casket exploded. And the Chicago Press newspaper ran a story titled "Explosion of a Metallic Coffin." It was a marketing nightmare for the company, which rushed to clear their name. In fact, the company wrote an editorial in the New York Times. I found the letter dated November 15th, 1858, and here it is in its entirety. To the editor of the New York Times, an article under the above caption, taken from the Chicago Press, having been published in your widely circulated journal, we deem it a duty to ourselves and the public to make an explanation. We are the owners and manufacturers of the Fisk Patent Metallic Burial Case, but having no customers which we supply in Chicago or vicinity, it could not have been a case of our manufacture that, as we stated, quote, exploded, end quote. But from the description given, we infer that it was a coffin made at the West as an evasion of the patent under which we manufacture, styled a, quote, casket, the top of which is made almost entirely of plate glass. It is hardly necessary for us to say that from the very principle upon which our patent metallic burial case is constructed, such a thing as an explosion is impossible. We could give many instances from among the many thousand cases made and sold by us for the past 6 years that have been submitted to the severest test in the transportation of bodies, not only to and from distant parts of our country, but to Europe and the West Indies. Perhaps no more notable occasion or severe test was ever applied than in the case of the transportation of the remains of the Honorable Henry Clay from Washington during the hottest weather in July, with many delays, to their final resting place in Kentucky, which was done to the entire satisfaction of the Senate committee who had the matter in charge, and whose certificate to that effect has been heretofore published. We might cite hundreds of instances to the same purpose, but believing that with the explanation we have given above, the article which has been going around will not tend to decrease the confidence hitherto bestowed by the public upon the Fisk patent metallic burial cases as manufactured by us. We should and intrude ourselves upon your time and space, were it not that the article you have copied makes use of a name or names that have for years been applied to the article manufactured by us, and thus a great, though unintentional, injury is done to their reputation. Yours respectfully, Raymond and Company, 536 Broadway. As if this bad publicity wasn't enough to put the nail in the coffin, in September of 1849, a fire destroyed Ullman's new iron foundry in Queens, along with most of his coffins. When that happened, he was forced to use his coffin patent as collateral to refinance his business. And as if that wasn't bad enough for business, Ullman died on October 13, 1850, at the age of 32 from unknown causes. But the Fisk Metallic Burial Case's tale continues even today. A case was featured in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein film released this year. A pivotal scene features the death of Victor Frankenstein's mother. She's buried in a Fisk casket. The scene features her face pale and lifeless in the glass of the coffin. That glass didn't just offer grieving relatives a final peek at their loved ones. It also offered grave robbers a quick way to find any valuables the dearly departed may have been buried with. This horrifying tale of grave robbing from a Fisk casket comes courtesy of the Augusta Chronicle of Georgia. And I'll read it. Mary Ann Price deserved better. Born in 1834, the wife of Dr. J.R. Price, a Burke County physician, died 4 days before her 29th birthday. 130 years later, in the March of 1983, her bones were dumped near her grave in an abandoned cemetery near Midville, and her unique cast iron casket was sold to a junk dealer for $25. It's believed this was not the first time someone had disturbed the eternal rest of Mrs. Price, and you might blame her doctor husband. That's because when she died in 1853, her body had been placed in one of the latest trends in coffin construction, a tightly sealed cast iron container with a glass plate over the face. Such metallic burial cases were not only patented, but manufactured by A.D. Fisk of Rhode Island, and in the mid 1800s proved popular with those who could afford them. A doctor, perhaps. At the time, a pine box coffin cost $2. The metallic burial case was closer to $100. And yes, the Augusta Chronicle of 1854 advertised Fisk's celebrated metallic burial cases at Henry and Skinner Undertakers on Broad Street. An airtight process not only kept the body from decay, but allowed the face to be seen through the glass. Such burial containers were also considered invaluable when someone died far away and the body had to be shipped home for burial. The facial window allowed identification. The burial cases were somewhat exotic, said to resemble something you'd find in the tomb of an ancient Egyptian. They shared another trait with the old pharaohs. They attracted grave robbers. Anyone who left this world in a $100 coffin might have also been buried with valuable jewelry. That is believed to have happened sometime in the 1960s when someone broke the glass off Mrs. Price's coffin and took some jewelry or a necklace from her neck. With the seal broken, the body inside deteriorated. The Chronicle said, and by 1983, there were only some bones left, and these were left at the site while the casket and the abandoned cemetery's gate went to an Emmanuel County junk dealer. Word got out, according to the Chronicle. Burke County Sheriff's Sergeant Tommy Braswell and Agent Preston Purvis of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation were soon on the case. 2 local men were quickly arrested and indicted for removing a body from a grave as well as the theft of an old iron gate. It's unclear in the Chronicle's archives what happened to the 2 suspects. It's also unclear what was going on in Burke County in March of 1983, because days after the metal coffin case was reported, Burke County deputies would arrest a 22-year-old Sardis man for the theft of a skull from another grave. He said it was a, quote, prank, end quote, and authorities said they did not think the 2 cases were related. Now, that's the end of our Augusta Chronicle piece. Occasionally, these coffins still pop up. In one case, not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 were discovered in an unmarked grave at a cemetery in Columbus, Mississippi in February of 2025. That's just earlier this year. Here's the full story from the Columbus, Mississippi Dispatch. Quote, 4 metallic caskets, potentially dating back to the mid-1800s, were discovered in unmarked graves during a funeral service held earlier this month at Friendship Cemetery. Mayor Keith Gaskin said when preparing the grave for burial, funeral workers discovered, quote, unusual-looking coffins in the unmarked area. As they began preparing another spot in the family's plot, they discovered another. They kept checking areas, and there were more of them, Gaskin said. Quote, if you look at them, I mean, some people refer to them as mummies. Obviously, they're not mummies, but it's a style of casket that was popular during that time. We're not sure how all of that happened, end quote. Local historian Rufus Ward said the caskets found at the Friendship Cemetery appear to be Fisk coffins, a type that dates back to the 1850s. Ward believes the grave sites are likely located in the original 5 acres from the cemetery's founding in 1849. Soon after Friendship opened, graves were moved there from several other cemeteries, which accounts for the graves going back to 1823 appearing there, according to the Library of Congress website. The city acquired the cemetery in 1957, according to the Lowndes Funeral Home website, and is now 70 acres. Gaskin said there were no markers in the area to indicate that the burial plot was occupied. He added that the particular plot of land was located in a, quote, very historic area, end quote, of the cemetery, and the city is attempting to track that history through records. Quote, we are working with folks who have more expertise in this area than we do and are trying to make sure that we are identifying from the records that we have if we can find out who they are, when they were buried there, end quote, Gaskin said. Quote, we don't know if they were there prior to the time that became friendship, and people were not aware of it, end quote. Ward said these coffins, also called metallic burial cases, were advertised in the Columbus Primitive Republican newspaper from 1851 to 1853 and were sold in a furniture store on Main Street. State law requires cemeteries to maintain continuous and up-to-date records of those buried in the cemetery. But these older burials could have slipped through the cracks for a variety of reasons, Ward said. Quote, if that square is in the original part of the cemetery, it could be a lost record, Ward told the Dispatch. Ward said he'd heard of a similar situation happening in the past from people associated with the cemetery and funeral homes. Ward said, quote, it's rare, but it has happened on occasion where someone is buried in the wrong square. It's interesting, but it's not surprising with how old the cemetery is. And that's the end of the Columbus Dispatch article. And it's also the super tragic tale of the Fisk Metallic Burial Case. So let me know in the comments, would you want to be buried in a Fisk Metallic Burial Case? Would you bury one of your loved ones in this metal box? So if you liked this episode, could you do me a massive favor? Could you give me a follow, a like, drop a comment? You can also follow me on Instagram. I'm at weird_PVD. I'm also now on TikTok at weird.pvd. And I'm also on Facebook, so go find me. You can also share your weird stories over on Reddit at r/weirdpvd. I'm on Reddit, folks. Brand new world. And as always, don't forget to keep PVD weird.